I am opposed to the Health and Social Care Act. As a political intervention, it may constitute a recognition that the National Health Service is failing and needs to be propped up by the private sector. But it is a piecemeal reform that has no strategic vision. It misleads the public into thinking the crisis of healthcare can be solved by contracting out parts of the service. This is not the case. The only solution to failing wards and hospitals, to long waiting times for treatment, and to the crisis of medical research is a careful plan for the progressive privatization of the whole sector. That is a process that could be achieved in a decade if there was the political will and the determination. Government bidding for resources in a socialised system drives up prices, making healthcare unaffordable for those on average incomes, unless an increasing proportion of the national income is taxed to pay for this socialised medicine. That lowers levels of income overall, and it contributes to disease and ill health. A fully privatised system, with each sector of the health industry characterised by intense market competition, that would simultaneously drive down costs and drive up the quality of treatment, the quality of clinical results, and the quality of care and the quality of accommodation. Because of the economic inefficiency of nationalised medicine, shortage of resources drives populist governments to limit what hospitals are allowed to pay for drugs, or they ban entirely some expensive treatments. It also means that individuals find that they are not allowed to choose more expensive treatments, even when they're willing to pay for them. A privatised medical system would enable, moreover, the restoration of a properly professional relationship between doctor and patient, and it would get rid of the dehumanising and stultifying effects of bureaucracy that is inevitable in a large, depersonalised institution like the National Health Service. Then there's the issue of the creation of a dissatisfied workforce. Managing costs in a socialised medical system requires constant downward pressure on the salaries of medical professionals. Consultants, doctors, nurses, radiographers, podiatrists, all of them, all have their incomes regulated. This strangles the incentive for individuals to make financial and social sacrifices in order to get qualified in the first place. Thus, there is a dramatic reduction in both the number of medical professionals and in the quality of their diagnostic and treatment skills. The highly able individuals in any generation choose not to be attracted any longer to medicine. The existence of the National Health Service is a deterrent to the choice of medicine by most of the best brains of each generation. These talented people choose a different career. Socialised or nationalised medicine causes an enormous waste of resources. We all know of the difficulties of GP surgeries and accident and emergency departments created by the minority of people who refer themselves for a common cold or a mild sprain or an insignificant cut or just because they're feeling a little bit low. Then there is the question of research. The science of medicine is not simply about its application to cure illness via the administration of drugs or the application of surgical techniques. It is also about pushing back the boundaries of our knowledge. The only way to secure an appropriate balance between these two wings of medicine, application and research, is to ensure that there are equal incentives for both. And that can only be achieved through the operation of a market mechanism that expresses the population's balance of wants. It's only via the mediation of the market that can be achieved. In societies with socialised medicine, governments treat healthcare as exceptional. It is elevated as a special case and provided irrespective of cost. Yet it is not separate from the society in which we live. This marginalisation of the individual has wide social implications and consequences. It diminishes the importance of individual initiative and self-reliance. It implies that people will nevertheless be protected from their own indulgences by the state. It is an invitation to the population to think that they may do whatever they wish and that other people will pick up the tab for them. If socialised medicine worked in providing good health care, some of you might well judge these drawbacks to be a cost worth paying. But the NHS and socialised medicine does not provide good health care. It produces a bureaucratised, state-directed monolith that progressively reduces medicine to its most easily universalised treatments. That's why it needs thorough privatisation.
What do we think of Mr. Friedman Hayek's view?
The one word which seems to me to be absent from his rhetoric in all his talk about privatised care is profit.
I haven't heard a scrap of evidence in that whole speech, a scrap of evidence that shows that privatisation actually is going to add value to health.
So the question is, how is it that a marketised health system will not inevitably lead to a highly inequitable, tiered system in which the poor, the elderly, the most vulnerable are shoved to one side because their health problems are not easily convertible into hard cash?
I'll just say two things. If privatisation is so wonderful, what happened at Attenborough, where the first hospital that's been privatised is now to be taken back to where it should belong, in the NHS?
The speaker presents us with this image of a kind of self-contained system, marketised health, as opposed to what he describes, it seems to me, as a sort of pathologised social care. Describes it as a social infection, which I think is appalling.
Well, I'd like to thank you for all the questions because I agree with the point that's being made. I didn't make any reference to the question of profit in what I was saying because it was unnecessary. If one's talking about a privatised system, one is necessarily talking about a system whose driving force is the generation of profit by those who are making the provision and making the investment. I didn't mention it because it's obvious. But what's wrong with it? Compare and contrast the quality of medical provision between Britain on the one hand with its socialised medical system and the French Republic just across the Channel with its private medical system supported by a system of universal insurance. All the statistics demonstrate that the quality of the clinical care, the quality of the accommodation for patients, the speed of dealing with patient illnesses are all superior in the French system, and that is a system in which medical provision is provided by the private sector, private GPs, who drive themselves forward in the interests of their patients, but certainly with their eye on the bottom line of their balance sheet. But that doesn't divert them from the clinical care or from the research. So when it comes to the question of profit, I would put this to anyone who's concerned about it. What is it that you are in favour of? Is it an improved healthcare system, or is it an ideological commitment to a socialised medical system? Nobody is against having a nationwide health service. The only question is how best to provide it. I think privatisation is.
But what is it? Oh, Mummy, you've got it upside down. There you go. Oh! Now I see. Despite the fact that my grandson paints in the style of Vermeer, I still can't recognise a picture of the male genitalia. Oh, couldn't he paint a tree or something?
Mother, my son is not attending New York's finest art school so that he can paint trees.
Very liberal of you, Mariel.
First dig of the day. Noted. Mother, this is a gift from Tom.
Is it? Really? My new cleaner, Raina, is refusing to dust his painting of the hairy pomegranates. I don't think I can put her through this.
Mother, a cleaner is a cleaner.
How was your flight, Hank?
Nicholas, I resent the hours trapped in a titanium tube. It really disturbs my system.
Yes, well, I was heavily medicated, so I don't think we'll be staying too long. In fact, I might even just keel over after this glass of wine.
Ditto.
Where are you staying in London, Mariel?
Oh, the Dorchester, where the conference is being held.
I'm giving a paper on arthroplasty and glenoid reconstruction. It's the Bone and Joint Decade World Network Conference.
There's a day you won't get back again.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it, Iris.
Oh, yes, Mother, he's a wonderful speaker.
Oh, darling.
Oh, you are, darling, you're wonderful. Nicholas, I was just telling Mum before you arrived that we've moved from Manhattan to Peaksville.
We've got a beautiful condo overlooking the Hudson River.
Oh, you must be doing awfully well.
Oh, yes, Hank just got promoted to head of department at the New York Presbyterian Hotel in Columbia, Cornell.
You mean hospital, surely?
Oh, silly me, did I say hotel? It's just that the New York Presbyterian has rather a grand lobby.
Well, I'm not conversant with such glamour.
You should be. Nicholas, you should come visit us. Now you've got a little more time on your hands.
What?
Oh, Mummy told us you were made redundant. We're awfully sorry, Nicholas.
Sorry to hear it, Nick. That's rough.
It happened after the school got a new headmaster, a slashed budget, and a decimated art department. They kept the two young teachers.
Oh, cheaper that way, no doubt.
Yes, but can they do that? You should sue, Nicholas. Are you going to sue?
I'm of retirement age.
He was there for 16 years. Outrageous. Been terribly upset by it.
Maybe it's a good time to take things easy. Enjoy your life.
Hank, my wife died 2 years ago.
Oh yes, lovely Anna. You've got to take your mind off things, I understand.
Besides, I don't want to retire. I don't feel old.
Oh, Nicholas, who's gonna want you at 66? Oh, come on, you can take a hobby or something. He used to run marathons back in the old days.
But I'm too old to qualify as a mammal.
What's that?
A middle-aged man in Lycra.
Consult your cardiologist first. I've seen too many fatalities when old men suddenly re-engage with physical activity.
Oh, didn't you have a hospital appointment this morning? Urology, is that what you said?
Prostate? We're all at that age. What did your consultant have to say?
He was pushing some sort of injection.
Probably an anti-androgen. Stops testosterone, shrinks the balls.
Isn't that what they give to paedophiles?
Watch out for the mood swings.
What mood swings?
Oh, the consultant has given you menopause by injection, so hot flushes, night sweats, breasts, and rage to look forward to.
Oh, an impotent rage. Oh, I'm awfully sorry, Nicholas. We really shouldn't laugh.
He mentioned nothing of the sort. He was rather brusque.
A National Health Service consultant.
There are many things I could say about the NHS.
You get what you pay for.
And I've paid a lot of tax over 45 years.
I won't hear a word against it. I had a wonderful treatment at the Harrington last year.
Well, speaking as a disgusting American capitalist and orthopedic surgeon, I think our system works so much better than yours. No queues, no waiting lists.
We all know about your system, Hank, and we don't want it.
Oh, well, when there's a bottom line, shit gets done.
Shit costs, Hank.
Some of us are eating.
Sure, the insurance system can be problematic, but it's not as remotely screwed up as your system.
Hardly an endorsement of the American way, Hank.
I must invoke Colonel Thomas Rainsborough.
Oh, must you?
He said, I think the poorest he that is in England hath a right to live as the greatest he.
Mother, is he still doing that?
Stop being provocative, Muriel.
Didn't you used to be a
Oh,
socialist?
shh, not for at least 30 years now.
There's just something deeply incoherent about political beliefs based on an aspiration to equality with no thought to the cost.
People go bankrupt in the US over healthcare, and that's all I need to know.
Well, people die waiting for treatment here. That's all I need to know.
I think that privatisation should be something people aspire to, like owning a nice car instead of taking the ghastly tube.
Yes, if the wealthy use private healthcare, ordinary Joes would at least have a better funded service.
Oh, middle-class flight believers with your hideous insurance system.
That's right, Mum. Social solidarity still counts for something in this country.
Oh, the notion that we must all be cured alongside each other for the sake of solidarity is hideously ludicrous. What about quality? I've been reading hair-rising stories.
The Daily Mail again.
Oh, my guilty online pleasure.
Bad for your health, Muriel.
Oh, but whole hospitals have been implicated. And even with irrefutable evidence, still can't criticise it.
Bloody right! A few bad stories shouldn't damn the entire system, and the Secretary of State for Health is constantly critical of it. Oh, I'm very concerned about where this constant criticism is going to lead us.
The way of dentistry.
Oh, the British people will never let that happen.
It's happening.
I believe that the reforms are creating a better service. Dare I say a better England.
Bollocks, Hank! A better England has been overwhelmed by the rush to austerity and is flooded under a toxic cloud of lobbying.
Strivers, skivers, the country must take the medicine. The health service is broken. The coalition government is waging a war of ideologies. And our language has become so corrupt with advertising speak, we no longer realise it. We face not just a fight for the soul of the NHS, but for our souls, for England's.
Oh, Lord, excuse me while I throw up.
Muriel!
Oh, come on, why the old lefty hand wringing? Can't we just talk about, Homeland or Breaking Bad, like normal families?
Freedom from the costs of ill health. That's what we have now. Can you imagine a time before that? Oh, well, of course you can't. I can. Must never go back.
Mother, the war is over. Yes, the NHS is the envy of the world. The third world. And that's why every Somali or whomever from sub-Saharan Africa is coming over here, popping out their babies, and freeloading from whatever else they can get from the state.
I can't believe I'm related to you.
That's because, unlike you, I see things very clearly. The NHS has reached the age of retirement.
Now, Bevan once said, whenever you scratch a Tory, you find a fascist.
Mother, that's so true!
Thank you so much for having me here. For those who don't recognise me, of course, I'm Theresa May Hunt, the Health Minister. Now, I've sat politely and listened to some very coarse and controversial statements this evening, so I sincerely trust that you will afford me the same courtesy. Putting aside the party political rough and tumble in the pre-election period, the key issue here is to understand that however much you might not like the health and social care changes, this is not about the abolition or the privatisation of the NHS. In previous generations, certainly in the first decades of the last century, previous Conservative governments have been opposed to a nationalised health service, but that has not been true of the Conservative Party now for many decades. Today, as a government and a party, we are as committed to the NHS as are any of the other main parties. Britain without the NHS is inconceivable. Morally, politically and economically, the National Health Service is a necessity. And it is a service that must remain comprehensive, national in scope and free to its users at the point of delivery of service, not rationed by a person's ability to pay. Yet that does not mean that the NHS doesn't have to change and adapt. It doesn't mean that there is only one way for those core principles of equality and universality to be met. Finding the best way to deliver those core values while delivering an efficient service is what the NHS changes are about. They're not about destroying the NHS as our opponents like to suggest to their own political ends. They are rather about saving the NHS from threats that confront it in a dramatically different world to the one in which it was first established. And if you doubt this, let me draw your attention to my party's history concerning the NHS. We are engaging and training and retraining an extra 5,000 GPs to reduce waiting times for appointments. And when this is in place, we will be guaranteeing that patients will have access to their GPs from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and at weekends, and that to secure the quality and continuity, if you don't mind, of NHS care, everyone will be entitled to a named individual as their GP. Even before the next election, we are going to ensure that every NHS patient has an online access to their own medical record. And despite the drive to get the economy back on track, the austerity measures that this necessitates, we have in fact increased the NHS budget. The result of this budget increase is 6,500 more doctors, 3,300 more nurses, and those levels of spending have been ring-fenced. They will be protected in the next Parliament if the Conservatives are re-elected. Now, this track record is not the act of a government or of a party that is intent on dismantling the NHS. We have instead set out a bold vision for the future of the NHS. This means making it more responsive to patients and their immediate carers and freeing it from bureaucracy. As a result of the Act, patients will have access to information about their GPs and their hospitals and will take charge of their own treatment. But financial responsibility for the service will remain with the state. The service will remain a state-managed service free to users at the point of need. To empower patients, the reforms provide information on hospitals and vitally, and I think this is incredibly important, allow patients to choose their provider. The drive to efficiency will underpin the whole process. The aim is to cut management costs by 45%, not to save the Treasury, but to redirect the funds into frontline care. And if you wouldn't mind leaving questions till the end. The NHS will take advantage of the best available care on the most financially favourable terms by engaging in the commissioning of services from the most clinically effective and cost-effective providers. Commissioning bodies will not be ideologically constrained to seek services from only one kind of provider. It is the clinical need that will be paramount, and within that, the cost effectivity of the contract. Now, let me give you an example. If a patient in your area, let me run through it. If a patient in your area needs an MRI scan, but the local hospital does not have a machine, or the waiting time is 6 weeks, why should the hospital be prevented from contacting a private provider to get the scan done quickly? That is not privatising the NHS as a service. The service is still state-funded out of general taxation, and it is free on delivery to the patients. The pivotal responsibility is to ensure that the scan is available to the patient on the basis of clinical need and not on the basis of an ideological prejudice against private providers. Now tell me which of you disagrees with that principle. Tell me which of you is in favour of denying patients the opportunity of a scan that may provide life-saving information because of your hostility to free enterprise. I think, in all honesty, that it is wrong to oppose such changes. There will be an opportunity for questions in a moment. We are committed to the principle of the NHS. The social solidarity of shared access to collective health care, universally and freely available at the point of use. We are also committed to making our NHS service the best healthcare system in the world. At the moment, let me be honest, it is not. We are committed to preventing 25,000 avoidable deaths each year from venous thromboembolism and the high incidence of MRSA infection in our hospital. These are not the commitments of a party set on the destruction of the NHS. These are not the commitments of a party with a fixation on the free market. Medical care is not like a new car. It is not a luxury. Its availability should not depend on the size of your wallet. And that is why we, as a government and as a party, do not agree with those who argue for the privatisation of the NHS. And that is why our reforms in the Health and Social Care Act are not about privatisation, but about defending and improving our NHS.
Quite a speech from the Minister. Why is the Minister so anxious to demonstrate to the country that she cares about the NHS when the policies are so contradictory? But she still needs to convince us all that there can be a national health service.
Why doesn't the Minister allow the dust to settle on the NHS, to have a bit of safety and security, and not to change all the time everything?
A lot of health workers, nurses, care workers are either on frozen pay or minimal wage increases. A lot of the cleaners are on 0-hour contracts. How's that going to drive quality up? And where is that money going to come from if we're going to be lining the shareholders' pockets?
What is the Minister's personal involvement in any privatising company for the NHS, for any contractors, and what is the proportion of MPs who have an involvement in private companies working in the NHS?
One of the founding principles of the NHS is that it's not there simply so that I can get better health care. It's there so that, from paying my taxes and my national insurance, it's there so that I can live in a society where everybody gets good health care. Now, one of the things that's happened in the Health and Social Care Act is that NHS hospitals can take up to 49% of their income from private patients. Doesn't this mean that you are establishing a two-tier health service where some people get better service and other people have to wait and wait longer?
Does Mrs May represent the typical Tory view of saving the National Health Service? Because one of her MPs publicly stated that the development of the NHS was the worst mistake Britain had ever made.
Thank you very much for being so engaged and raising so many lovely and interesting points. I'm going to answer the first one and wrap in, I think, perhaps the final point that was made. The first thing that was asked was why do I care so much about demonstrating how much I care about the NHS? Why is it so important to me to reiterate that? And really, and I think the answer is firstly because I do care that much about the NHS. And for the record, may I say that my colleagues do too. I wouldn't be put in this position of being health minister if they weren't supporting me. And one of the reasons they support me is because they, like me, know how much I care about the health service. And I might add to that I do feel that a lot of press coverage that the Health and Social Care Bill has had has focused, on aspects of the bill where there is some uncertainty and so on and so forth. And of course, when changes are made, there are those where services are expanded and those where they're reduced. And of course, inevitably, the press is interested in the negative news stories. So I think it's important to talk about that. Now, secondly, I was asked why so much change is necessary all at once. And I have a great deal of sympathy with this. The idea that perhaps, when things need reforming, it's better to move slower rather than faster. I think in the case of the NHS, the simple fact is that the world is moving very fast in terms of healthcare. The world is changing. The economy is changing, medicine is changing, more and more treatments are being developed. They end up being very, very expensive a lot of the time. We simply cannot afford to stand still or go at a snail's pace if we are going to keep up with providing a world-class health service. I appreciate that there are always problems with things changing quickly, and there are those who, in those rapid changes, feel that they have been left behind. But unfortunately, if we stop and wait until every last individual is on board with these changes, it will be too late and our healthcare will be worthless. Thirdly, I was asked about those in the health service working on reduced wages, those on zero contract hours, those whose wage increases have not kept pace with inflation. And I absolutely take their concerns on board. There is, of course, right now, a series of government measures affecting right across the board, affecting all sectors of our society. Austerity is something which is going to affect all of us. We are in a situation where increasing salaries for those working in the public sector inevitably would mean taxing the rest of our society more aggressively. And we know that doing that will slow down the speed of economic recovery, which in turn will make it more difficult for people to earn more going forwards. Now, secondly, on that subject, there's a wonderful point that so many of you are missing, which is that now that NHS providers are being given the opportunity to farm out their business to whichever suppliers of medical care they want. Those who work in the NHS have the freedom to choose who to go and work for. And I advise you all to shop around and find those companies who will give you the terms and the wages that you feel you've earned and demonstrate that you've earned. That opportunity is for all of you to take. I was asked about the possibility of certain hospitals providing what becomes a two-tier health service when NHS hospitals are providing both public NHS patients and also treating private patients. And my friend here backs me up completely. That means these NHS trusts will be making a profit, and that profit will benefit all of us when it goes back into the NHS and can be used to provide frontline services. Now, finally, I was asked about my personal involvement with private healthcare, and you're absolutely right, as with a lot of ministers and a lot of people high up across all the parties. It is the case that there are certainly individuals within the Conservative government who have business interests in a very wide range of fields, and so do I, of course I do. And it is my experience of working, as many of you know I do, with some private healthcare providers that has put me in a position of seeing firsthand the enormously high quality of the work that these providers are doing. And it assures me and reassures me that we could not be distributing this work out to a more talented and capable group of companies. Thank you. And I shall finish by saying simply this. Nobody disputes the fact that every society needs a health service. The issue, and the one which we are facing up to, is how it is to be provided. Thank you very much.
Oh, hello. Right, good afternoon.
You've been waiting an hour.
We come when we get the call, sir.
Unbelievable.
Hello, dear.
Who are you?
My name is Roger. I work for the ambulance service.
Where's Charles?
Daddy died 20 years ago.
Good God! Nobody told me!
Would you like to tell us what's happened here, sir?
Who are you?
My name is Roger. I work for the ambulance service, darling.
She's had a fall. She's very confused.
How are you feeling, darling?
I am very well, thank you. This is a nice house.
You live here.
Oh, goody.
Would you like to tell me her name, sir?
Mrs. Iris James.
And is she on any medication?
Blood pressure.
Oh, what's all this?
Mrs. James, do you have any pain?
No. Who are you?
I'm Terry, darling. I work for the ambulance service. 186 over 90, Rog. Mrs. James, I'm just going to have a quick check to see if you've hurt yourself, all right?
Where's Charles?
Mum.
What are you doing?
That's it, well done. No broken bones, Rog.
Is it a stroke?
She's got speech, her face hasn't dropped. Could be a transient ischemic attack. Can you lift them then?
Lift what?
Your arms.
Why would I do that? Who are you?
I'm Terry, darling. I work for the ambulance service.
This is a nice house.
Why is she repeating herself?
We don't know at the moment, sir.
I'd like to go to the bathroom. Blast the bitches!
Settle down, darling. What day is it today?
I don't know.
When were you born?
Impertinent.
Who is the current Prime Minister?
That's a very silly question. Ted Heath, of course.
She's not joking, is she, sir?
No.
What's happening, Nicholas?
We're going to take you to A&E.
Take her to the Harrington, it's her local hospital.
Oh, fuck! Hospitals kill!
The topic tonight is how we should organise the health service.
The key issue for me as a campaigner, I suppose, is twofold in a way. One, it's about my frustration in a way, not in here tonight, but my frustration generally is not engaging, not having enough people engage with the issues that we are faced with in the NHS at the moment. So it's how much do people actually realise what's going on? And then how as a campaigner, can we encourage people to be much more active? And it's interesting to look at the numbers. 2 years ago, 5 of us met in a pub to talk about these issues and what we could do. Last week, there were 35 people here rehearsing for this evening. And look how many are here tonight. It's probably about 250 people. But I still have an issue. And that is, I reckon there are probably about 300,000 people in Brighton and Hove altogether. So where's everybody else? And how can we, all of these different people, different ages, different communities, different situations, different demands, you can imagine the demands of all of us on health and social care. How can we engage with more people, particularly this year, this is the issue, when it seems to me that there's so much evidence accumulating that there's a huge threat to all these services, particularly because of the new Health and Social Care Act, which has allowed the government and the local council, it has to be said, to start selling off piecemeal some of the services that have been locally provided by our own health professionals across the city. And as we have already seen recently as well, as I say, it's accumulating, the evidence that private providers are beginning to fail. They cannot provide the same kind of services for all sorts of reasons. So my question is, don't you think it's time that we should all be talking about these issues now, quickly, before it's too late?
The critical issue for me is funding of the NHS. If primary care was funded adequately, A&E departments wouldn't get overwhelmed. All I hear in the press recently is the propaganda machine with negatives about A&E all the time. And as an A&E nurse, I get really demoralised by that. We don't want to see people on trolleys for 4 hours. We don't want to see people languishing in the corridors waiting to see a doctor or a nurse. But because GP surgeries aren't funded properly, people come up to A&E, sometimes quite inappropriately. Only yesterday, I had a young man turn up with a sore throat. And he said, I've got a sore throat, got a temperature, but I can't get to see my GP for 3 weeks, so I thought I'd come up to A&E. Now, as much as I'd like to comfort him, give him some Strepsils and send him on his way, A&E is for heart attacks and for emergencies. And I get very frustrated because I can't deliver the quality care that I was trained to deliver because I haven't got enough colleagues.
I completely sympathise with the way in which A&E gets to be seen as the target when actually what's failing is something that's far more systemic. One of the things I'm trying to get in Parliament right now is a debate about funding for GP surgeries. We know here in the city it's a major problem that GP surgeries are closing and not being replaced. We've already got the campaign around Eton Place. And what happens then is that if people can't get access to their GPs, then, as you say, they go to A&E. But it's also about how we recruit our nurses and the way we treat our nurses. When you've got a government that won't even honour the pay recommendation, which is below inflation anyway, then it's absolutely outrageous. So I'd simply say that when you've got a government that's cutting council budgets so that social care goes, when it's a government that won't pay for nurses and therefore that's undermining that service, then I think it's really unfair that all of that gets focused on A&E when, from what I've seen, you're absolutely doing the best that you can. And And to reply to Katrina, I guess my answer to your question about how do we get more people involved, I think a crucial thing is to demonstrate that people can make a difference, that campaigners can make a difference. You know, there's that wonderful quote from Alice Walker who said that the most common way that people give away their power is by not thinking they have any. Well, we do all have power, and you can show it in this election and in lots of other ways as well. But I think if we can demonstrate how people have made a difference and can make a difference, and how some of those campaigns you were talking about have already been successful, like the one on sexual health, then perhaps that would engage more people to get involved.
I'm a health visitor in Brighton, just around the corner here at Tana Children's Centre. And I think one of the difficulties for me, it mixes with what you both said, is that when you work in the NHS, you are so busy all the time. As a nurse, talking about anything political with your patients is taboo. You know, so it's really hard to A, engage my colleagues, and B, talk to my patients within the present context. Even though I'm very politically involved in Brighton, it's very, very hard. And that makes it almost harder because you have to be almost quieter if you are very politically involved.
We all who are just users of the service across the city have an extra duty really to help our colleagues who are working as health professionals, because as you said, I've heard the most hideous stories about, and seen evidence actually of some quite aggressive management tactics in closing people down and trying to create an atmosphere in workplaces which, as you say, almost removes your right to talk, to speak to each other about, what is it about politics that is so... People talk about their sex lives, they'll tell you that, but they won't talk about their politics. What's gone wrong?
I'd just like to interject with that. I put up Defend the NHS leaflets in various sites across the Royal Sussex County, and they're taken down. Within half an hour of me putting them up, someone is stalking me and thinking, oh, that militant, right, we'll take her stuff down.
An important message for you: use superglue next time. It'll drive them mad. And very succinctly, everyone seems hypnotized. Everyone's got this feeling down here that this is going to happen. What we need is some very practical political ideas. How are we going to stop those people, which pretty much incorporates 85% of the contents of the Houses of Commons and the Lords? They are doing it to us. How do we practically stop them? This is really, from the grassroots, what we want to hear.
2 points to make, really. First, the notion that we can trust Burnham and the Labour Party on the NHS is a pile of crap. The record of the previous Labour government is one through which everything that the present condems are doing has been put through. And that's not just a question of PFI, bringing in the private sector and everything. It's the scumbags who were secretaries of state for health joining boards of private health companies. That's what working with the private sector means.
I'm a doctor now retired from the health service, and I'd like to know what this audience can do to protect a certain Dr. Galloway who had the courage and principle to speak out on what was done, is being done to A&E. Because if we do nothing else, we must protect, we must show solidarity with the people who seek to protect us.
Can I just check and see, is there anybody from the Labour Party here who might be prepared to respond to Bob's point about the lack of credibility the Labour has? Because to tell you the truth, when I heard Mr. Hayek speak, I thought there's a catastrophic lack of imagination, thinking that the only solution to some of the problems to do with what he called socialised medicine is to privatise medicine, as if privatisation had worked for anybody at any time. But at the same point, Bob, whilst I agree with him with the history of the Labour Party, there's a catastrophic lack of imagination, saying that it only has to repeat itself. Come May, there's very, very little that some of us are going to have to do apart from vote for the Labour Party. So I'd like to see, is there anybody here in the Labour Party who'd be prepared to stand up and say that they too will defend the NHS, and that'll go the whole way down. Because one of the things I think we will agree on is any private involvement in the NHS will screw us. It's how it works. There is no capacity to bring it in and have a little bit and hope that it'll just be self-contained. It's not how it works. When profit was mentioned before, profit is the contagion. Profit, and it's immoral or amoral in the sense that it's not responsible for it. When profit leads, everything else will have to follow. So I really would like to hear if somebody from the Labour Party was here and be prepared to stand up and say that they would defend the NHS and give us something in Brighton and Hove to vote for come May.
Chat, you're too busy. Yeah. Can I give you a lovely, lovely shiny leaflet?
You can.
Hey. Are you on? Oh, sorry,
This is Mr. Union.
Yeah, he's Mr. Millview Unison.
Mr. Millview Unison. Do you know Tom? Ian.
You must know him. He's a militant.
He's Mr. Trades Council as
He's
well.
I reckon they know each other, these two.
Are you busy mates, really? Are you?
No, they're all right then. I should push you under the next bus.
You
got you back to the
you
traffic.
didn't know us.
Great,
Very
thanks.
convincingly.
It's only because I could shoot past quickly.
There's no such thing as no shoot past quickly.
So when's that taking place?
Are you on the picket line at Millview on Thursday?
We're not going to have pickets this Thursday. We're going to have a demonstration outside Oldham.
What time's that?
And that's going to be at 9. Well, probably about 9:30. We're going to ask people to get down there for. And then they've organised a flatback truck in the level.
Right, for the rally at 1 o'clock. Yeah.
In an SMS then.
At the Defend meeting, I told you that SMS services were going out to Cranston, so I was effectively out of job, yeah, because I wasn't on a secondment, I was on a short-term fixed contract, so I've lost my job.
The cavalry has arrived!
Oh, thank God. Oh, fuck.
Nicholas!
For goodness sake. Did you have a plane to catch or something? I thought you were meant to be giving a paper this morning.
Oh, I've managed to change it till this afternoon.
Oh, well done, darling. Mother, we're not going anywhere.
Well, there's really no need for you both to be here.
Oh, I've taken the liberty of booking an admission to the London Bridge Hospital. I hope you don't mind. They have a beautiful waterside room for you if you so wish.
Yes, Mother. Hank has a colleague at the London Bridge. Top neurologist.
Yes, I heard.
They still have mixed wards here?
John. What is he doing?
Reverend's on the floor! Nicholas, call for the nurse!
Oh, shit, I was supposed to be taking care of him!
Nurse? My name is Dr. Kestel. Sir, are you hurt?
Oh, he can't speak, Hank.
This place stinks, dear God. Is that blood on the ceiling? Honey, you wouldn't mix up hospital and hotel here. This reminds me of the city public where I worked as a junior doctor. It's where you go when you don't have insurance. To think the amount of patients I killed there. By accident, of course. And how is that, sir?
Is he okay?
No broken bones. You're lucky, sir.
His name is Reverend John.
I hope you don't mind, Reverend John. Nicholas and I are going to move you now.
Okay, what's the best way of doing this?
I'm lifting by the shoulders.
Fuck off. Fuck off.
Oh, you're him!
He's a dead weight.
Oh, it can't be that difficult.
You try lifting him. Where's the goddamn nurse? I think you gave yourself a bit of a fright there, Reverend John.
Be careful with the puddle on the floor.
Oh, the poor fellow.
Help is on the way, Reverend John.
Is there any sign of a nurse?
Okay, Mr. John, what's going on?
He fell out of his chair. We assisted him.
Mr. John forgets he can no longer walk. You moved the patient?
A nurse.
Gina?
Nurse Gina. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I assessed the gentleman and I found no injury, but you may have to check for bruising.
When members of the public feel they must step in for stuff, that's it, I go. Fuck this shit! I've had enough! Screw the bastards! Fuck this! Fuck!
There's really no need for that.
Oh, Gina, we're terribly sorry.
So what are you doing there? Is it the same, your community?
I'm like a community charge nurse or community sister working with homeless, mental health patients with drug and alcohol problems.
Misuse,
So I have to focus on the people with complex needs who are always rocking up at A&E.
Exactly.
So my job is trying to divert them and save the NHS money, because every time they rock up at A&E, it costs a fortune.
Like, with that, you know, when we were chatting, you're going, as soon as somebody comes into any in reception, it costs...
It's 120 quid to step in the door and just get registered and clerked in by the front office. As soon as they're triaged, it goes to 300. As soon as they're seen by a doctor, it goes to 500, 600. Then when they get admitted, 1,000, you know, and when they get admitted, that's another 500 quid a night.
Yeah.
So a little short stay in A&E, or AMU, £3,000.
Mother, I am having you transferred to a private hospital immediately.
You must be joking. They'll charge through the roof for their scans and ECGs and end up sending me back to the NHS because I'm too bloody old and banjaxed. Hell, I'm not having it. Do you hear?
Mariel and I will pay for everything.
It's not about money, Hank.
Leave it, Mariel.
Next thing you know, you'll be booking me into the Autumn Lodge or some such because you think it's best. I'm not having it. Your father and I were here for the birth of the NHS. We were amazed and grateful for Mr. Attlee's brave new world. It's seen us through broken limbs, appendicitis, births, and deaths. We've needed it and believed in it, and I'm not going to give up now. So, you can all fuck off if you think I'm leaving. Hank, go and get your paper. Mariel, go with him. Nicholas, you stay. Now, where is that wretch of a doctor?
The best way to provide healthcare is on a national scale. Any other possibility, breaking the health service up into specialisations, regions and care types, only serves to allow each area to be squeezed against each other. We don't need patients lying in their deathbeds wondering whether their primary care trust or their regional specialist service has let them down, wondering whether they should have chosen a different clinic or a course of treatment that was cheaper and less effective but could be offered for a longer period. Everyone needs a single point of reference for their healthcare. We go to the nearest provider and they refer us to the best provider for our needs. No ifs, no buts. And we need to get away from this idea that somehow healthcare provision is a competition with financial constraints or our economy. Somehow we can afford Trident, we can afford illegal wars, we can afford to leave a third of the world's money completely untaxed in unsure tax havens, and yet we cannot afford the best chemotherapy drugs for those who will die without them. In the US, where healthcare is not nationalised, a majority of home repossessions are related to healthcare costs, and a majority of those are among families who did have health insurance, but where the insurance had a cap or excluded certain conditions. Everyone in the world values their life more than their house, so we shouldn't be surprised about this. Of course they do. Whatever it costs to give people optimum healthcare, we must find that money and ensure it is spent getting them the treatment that they deserve. If we really cared about reducing the cost of healthcare provision, we would spend money funding medical research. It is outrageous that we leave those things to large, profit-driven corporations in whose interest it is to focus on the most lucrative conditions and leave people needing continued medication for as long as possible. Meanwhile, there are actually people in our society with skills who want to find cures for cancer and are stuck instead going into management consultancy because their funding options are too limited for them to take their desired career seriously. Instead, we should pay for medical research at state level, and when it yields results, those treatments will not cost us the earth because the patents for them will already belong to the state. These facts are simple and straightforward, completely incontestable. Anyone in government who suggests anything else is a corrupt liar who is willing to sell the poor and the sick down the river for their own profit. And frankly, if I worked in the health service, I would go out of my way to poison the evil bastards.
What the A&E crisis has shown over the last couple of weeks is there's a clear game of supply and demand going on in the media. Supply and demand, that is the game that politicians play. We have a crisis, the A&E crisis. What happens is if you're the party in power, you are the demand party. You talk a lot about demand, unsustainable demand, unexpected, unseasonal demand. It's all about demand, an ageing population. Demand, demand, demand. Jeremy Hunt was on TV last week all the time, almost looking like he was about to cry because he believed so much in the problems of demand. And then you have Andy Burnham talking about supply. Supply, supply. It's not enough supply of doctors, not enough supply of money, not enough supply of health and social care. Supply is the issue, and then they scrape their way to 35%. That's what they need there, 35%. And then if they get in, they become the demand party. Another one becomes a supply party, and they argue again the next one. And nothing really changes. You talk to people in Worthing, what do they say? All politicians are the same. All politicians are not the same. We have to hold our politicians to account. We have to do it, and Sussex Defend the NHS is a vehicle to do it. 35 people is not enough. It's absolutely scandalous. This is the worst NHS crisis in our time. All of these little meetings that are happening in Sussex, the Health and Wellbeing Boards, the CCGs, the HASCs, the Policy and Resources Committees, that is where MSK is being sold off. It's where substance misuse is being sold off. It's where ISIS is being sold off. And it's Sussex Defend the NHS that is doing it. They're standing in the way. They're just about the only thing that is standing in the way. And 35 people is not enough. Don't kid yourselves that the problem here is the Tories. Don't think that privatisation is down to the Tories, David Cameron, Andrew Lansley and all that lot. Let's be honest. We all knew what they were going to do. They do what they do. They lie to get in power. They get in power. They privatise anything they get their grubby hands on, and then they give the money to their party donors. We all knew it. It's not a surprise. What we have to do is look at what we're doing. Everything about privatisation we define. That is the bottom line. Make no mistake. So I want to ask everyone in this room tonight, take a good, long, hard look. Are we doing everything we possibly can locally to be a part of this fight? Because if we're not, make no mistake, we are the reason that the NHS is being privatised.
You want it, but you won't fight for it. You think you will. You say you will. You don't know what it means. We who think it doesn't work know this. Sentimental attachment. Your Britain, identity, embroiled with the idea of the NHS, source of opposition, lever of politics, embroiled, entwined, imbricated, sentiment, care, love, community, tenderness, sympathy, sense of virtue, feeling, optimism. But sentiment, sentiment. Source of opposition, seat of hope, the right to a home, the right to a job, the right to healthcare. Powerful provocation, trifled with at political risk, and yet sentiment as febrile tendon, disabling wound not yet visible. You want it, but will you fight? Can you fight? Fight. Risk. Loss. Where then? What fight? What power? And what objective? Politics and its legislations, technical matters, the extent of market intervention. Will you accept? Definitions prescribe action. You want it, to preserve it, but what is it? What is the limit of commitment? The ambit of resistance. We who will change it are beware of your sentiment. Yet we know the frailty of sentiment, fractures in the foundations of it. Sentiment to sentimentality. Sentimentality to nostalgia. Nostalgia to melancholia. Perverse, paralyzing, or as performance, a cover for retreat and acceptance in the end, exculpation for surrender. Is that your opposition? We are not sure. 1948, the NHS, national insurance, sickness and unemployment benefits, maternity grants, retirement pensions, family allowances, child benefits, a cohesive society, a deprivatization of care, a nationalisation of need, a welfare state, Attlee, Bevan, new homes and new towns, free secondary education for all. That was then. What ransom will property pay for the security it enjoys? Asked Chamberlain. Radical liberal in his youth, member of a coalition government with the Tories by the turn of the century, ever were things the same. The sinews of a system, preserve property at whatever cost. The ransom, the welfare state, the National Health Service. If we don't give them reform, they will give us revolution. The reforms duly paid as ransom. 1945. Mutinies, resentment, determination, class suspicion, social unrest. Churchill defeated. Signs of impending threat. Little understood. Struggle and anger disappear. Reforms become natural, evolutionary, rational. Consciousness congeals. Cultural memory swerves. Illusion supervenes. Enshrine it in fine words. Adorn it with sentiment. Labour, Tory, Liberal. Ratchet the rhetoric. Bedeck it in the national tradition. But save property. You want it. And what will you do? Authority, the authority of common sense, and budgets weigh on you. The law of the father, property or the NHS, public health or private wealth. The state as purchaser and not provider, patients as customers rather than patients, outsourcing for efficiency, private finance as magic money. And you? The election will decide, power of the ballot box, respect the outcome, democracy at work, no provision without a healthy economy, a political choice, change in form, not in substance. We cannot act and risk damaging patient care. Respect the law, voice opposition, but act within the law. We can protest, but we can't prevent. Secondary action is unlawful. Think of the opinion polls. Think of the election. Bad faith. Refuse to refer to a private hospital? Will you defy your contractual terms? Will you defy the law? Risk your job? Inside or outside the NHS? Stop work? Lose money? Measure your electoral support? Will you? We doubt it. We'll test you. And we who dare may win. You want it. You want to defend it. What will you do? Sentiment demands it. Sentimentality betrays.
I think I probably did move a bit, but in the main I did